were always there. Every call, every message, every emotional fallout, they knew you'd catch them. Until one day, you didn't. And now, they're spiraling. See, avoidants play a dangerous game. They want intimacy, but only if they can control it. They want connection, but only on their terms. The second you pull back, not out of spite but from self-respect, they lose that control. And when you become unavailable, they don't just miss you, they panic. You've been told that if you walk away, you'll lose them forever. That if you stop reaching out, they'll forget you. That if you become unavailable, someone else will take your place. But here's the truth. Avoidants aren't turned off by space. They're terrified of it. Because space reveals something no contact ever could. How much they truly depended on your presence to avoid themselves. You weren't just an option. You were their emotional anchor. They just never admitted it. Until now, every avoidant has a playbook. Push you away. Wait for your chase. Rinse. Repeat. But when you don't play along, when your phone goes silent and their texts go unanswered, that's when the fear creeps in. Because now you're the one that's unpredictable. Now they don't know where they stand. And for the first time, they're the one anxiously checking their phone. Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Be willing to be misunderstood in silence. So you can be reborn in power." Avoidants aren't heartless. They're hurting humans hiding behind walls. But their ego, it needs to believe they're above emotion, that they can detach without consequences. So when you become unavailable, not by playing games but by choosing peace, they start to feel the weight of their own avoidance. Their mind replays what they didn't say, what they didn't do, what they took for granted. That's when panic sets in, not over losing you, but over realizing they might have lost someone who finally stopped waiting. Secret mantra. They expected me to wait. I chose to rise. Emotionally available people are rare. You showed up when it mattered. You offered depth when others offered distraction. But the more available you were, the more they took it for granted. That changes when you're no longer around to validate, soothe, or chase. Emotional scarcity kicks in, and suddenly the very thing they dismissed becomes the only thing they crave. This isn't manipulation, it's gravity. What pulls away, pulls attention. What becomes scarce, becomes valuable. You don't need to block them. You don't need to post cryptic messages. You don't even need to warn them. Just disappear into purpose. Show up in real life instead of their feed. Build muscle, discipline, clarity, stillness. Become so unavailable to drama that even your silence sounds like a boundary. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Let them panic. Let them project. Let them question. But you, stay grounded in who you're becoming." Most avoidant exes make one fatal assumption: that your love has no limit. That no matter how many times they pull away, you'll be there, waiting. That assumption keeps them emotionally lazy. But when you become unavailable, that comfort collapses. Suddenly, their mind is forced to do something it hasn't done in months: value you in your absence. That's when the panic isn't about you leaving. It's about them realizing you're no longer coming back. They might not say it, but you'll feel it. The views on your stories, the random texts, the comments from mutual friends, they'll find ways to orbit again. Because when you're unavailable, you're no longer predictable. You're not feeding their cycle anymore, you're breaking it. And deep down, even they know They don't want someone else to claim what they took for granted. They want to see if you still care. But if you've done the work, you don't. You used to explain your needs. You used to beg for clarity. You used to ask them why they kept pulling away. Now, you just go quiet, not out of punishment, out of self-worth. And nothing rattles an avoidant more than the realization that you don't need closure to move on. You became unavailable, and their access expired. Now they're left wondering what changed, what they didn't see, what you finally saw. That's how power returns. When you no longer chase peace, you become it. This video is for those who stopped begging and started becoming. For those who realize that when you finally go silent, you're not losing them. You're finding yourself. So watch this until the end, because we're going to break down exactly what happens inside the avoidance mind the moment you become unavailable. You'll understand their panic, their regret, and their patterns, so you can finally stop personalizing their confusion. Like this video. Subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Join our channel membership to help us keep making videos like this. All right, folks. If you're ready to evolve, go ahead and type this in the comments. I didn't walk away. I just became unavailable to what no longer aligned. So, let's dive in. They're watching. But now, you know what? You don't have to care. Just stay focused. Now, let's introduce our first key point. The power shift begins the moment you go silent. When you become unavailable, something immediate happens, and it's psychological, not emotional. Avoidant X's operate from control. That's their safety net. They distance themselves, withhold affection, stay vague, and disappear when things feel too intimate. Because as long as they're the one pulling away, they feel powerful. But the moment you stop chasing, the moment you don't respond to that breadcrumb text, don't watch their story, don't ask them how they're doing, the power shifts, and they feel it. See, the entire dynamic with an avoidant person depends on imbalance. They're comfortable when they sense you need them more than they need you. But when you pull back, you don't just shift your energy, you shift the narrative. Suddenly, they're the one checking your status. They're the one refreshing your page. They're the one spiraling in silence, wondering what happened. Because here's what most people don't realize. Avoidants aren't as detached as they pretend to be. They just need space to avoid vulnerability. But they still want to be wanted. They still need to feel like they matter. When you stop giving them that validation, they go into emotional freefall, not because you attacked them, but because you removed the mirror that reflected their importance back to them. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And when you disregard them, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, you become the one who's free. You no longer orbit around their emotional inconsistencies. You no longer dance for a crumb of their attention. You are no longer under the illusion that their silence means strength, because your silence just exposed their fear. Let them feel the absence. Let them wonder where you went. Because the most powerful position you can hold is the one where you no longer need to be seen to have an impact. Key point 2. Their fantasy of control starts to crumble. Avoidant X's thrive on illusion. The illusion that they're always in control, always one step ahead emotionally. They convince themselves that they can leave without consequences, that you'll always be there. That, no matter how far they pull away, you'll be waiting, checking in, sending just thinking about you messages, and trying to fix what they've already decided to sabotage. But when you become unavailable, when your presence is no longer predictable, their carefully constructed fantasy starts to collapse. They told themselves they didn't need you, that they'd be fine. That space would feel like freedom. But now that you're not checking in, not reacting, not trying to explain yourself, their mind does exactly what yours used to do: spirals. What if they met someone else? What if they really don't care anymore? What if I was the problem all along? See, avoidance isn't emotional maturity. It's emotional evasion. And they built their confidence on the assumption that your heart was always available real estate. But now, that house is locked. The lights are off. No vacancy. And that silence echoes louder than any argument ever could. Suddenly their superiority complex becomes an insecurity spiral. They'll act fine on the surface, of course. Post selfies, party, pretend to thrive. But behind that smile is a growing panic. Because deep down they know the person who no longer needs them owns the emotional high ground. And that, right there, is the shift they never prepared for. As Seneca said, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Now, they're the one imagining. Imagining who's texting you, who's holding your attention. Imagining what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and whether you've truly moved on. They used to think silence gave them power. But now, your silence is their prison. Because control was never about love. It was about security. And once they feel that security slipping, that's when the panic begins. Key point 3, their ego can't handle your indifference. Let's cut through the noise. Most avoidant exes aren't heartless, they're ego-driven. And here's the uncomfortable truth. As long as you were reacting, begging, over-explaining, or even arguing with them, they felt important. Your emotional responses weren't just validation. They were proof that they still mattered, that they still had access, that no matter how cold or inconsistent they were, they still owned real estate in your mind. But when you become unavailable, genuinely, emotionally, energetically, they don't just lose your attention. They lose their sense of identity in the relationship. Because avoidants have a fragile ego that thrives on silent superiority. I care less, so I win. That's the twisted game. And when you stop playing, when you don't even bother explaining your silence, when you're not angry, you're just done. That's not indifference to them. That's an insult. It cuts deeper than any dramatic breakup line ever could, because it forces them to sit with a truth they never wanted to face. They weren't as irreplaceable as they thought, and ego hates that. They start posting more, trying to look unbothered, throwing out passive-aggressive stories, even testing the waters with "How've you been?" texts masked in casual tones. But all of it, every breadcrumb, is a panic response to your indifference. They're poking the fire to see if it's still warm, because if you've really gone cold, if you've truly detached, that's not just rejection, that's ego death. As Ryan Holiday put it, ego is the enemy. And when you stop feeding their ego, it starves, it panics, it lashes out in quiet, passive ways. But your power, it's in not reacting. Because the less you respond, the more they unravel. They didn't expect to miss you this much. They didn't expect your silence to sting. They didn't expect you to become the one who no longer cares. But now, that's the version of you they can't stop thinking about. Key point 4, your emotional detachment becomes their unexpected mirror. Here's where the shift gets brutal. When you detach emotionally, they're finally forced to face themselves. Avoidant exes run from intimacy, not because they don't feel, but because they don't want to feel too much. Vulnerability terrifies them. That's why they push people away when things get too real. But when you were emotionally available, you became their shield. You absorbed the tension, carried the weight, made the effort, and gave them the illusion that everything was fine. But when you go silent, when you don't argue, explain, plead, or prove anymore, you hold up a mirror they can't avoid. And what they see isn't pretty. They start to realize that all the things they blamed on you, the needy behavior, the emotional tension, the discomfort in the relationship, weren't yours. It was them. It was always them. Now that you're out of the picture, the chaos doesn't go away. In fact, it gets louder. Why? Because there's no one left to regulate their emotional dysfunction. No one to keep reaching out. No one to chase them. They're finally left with their own patterns, their own avoidance, their own fear. And in that space, your silence becomes the loudest feedback they've ever gotten. They thought leaving would bring them peace. Instead, it gave them a front-row seat to their own emptiness. They thought you'd collapse without them. Instead, you elevated. You didn't just walk away, you leveled up, emotionally and energetically. And now they're realizing that the calm, confident version of you they feared losing is the only version they truly miss. Because you're no longer reacting. You're no longer needing. You're no longer explaining your worth to someone too blind to see it. And that's the version they can't access anymore. Not through guilt, not through games, not even through fake check-ins. Because once you emotionally detach, they can't manipulate what they no longer control. Here's your secret mantra. Drop it in the comments if you're truly done shrinking to be understood. I gave peace. They gave panic. Let that sink in. You brought them grounding. They brought you confusion. Now, your absence is showing them the difference. They won't say it. They'll never admit it. But in the quiet moments, when the distractions fade and no one's watching, they miss you more than they ever expected to. And they have nothing to blame but the mirror you left behind. A key point 5. They realized too late that you were the safe space they couldn't create for themselves. Here's the harshest irony of all. Avoidant exes often don't recognize real emotional safety until it's gone. While you were present, supportive, patient, and emotionally available, they mistook your consistency for weakness. Your effort felt smothering. Your love felt like pressure. Not because you were too much, but because they were unequipped to receive it. You were offering them something they didn't even know they were starving for, a safe space to be seen without judgment. But avoidants don't know how to sit in safety. They're wired to flee it, to sabotage it, to test it until it breaks, just to confirm the narrative they've clung to their whole life. People always leave. I can't trust intimacy. I'm better off alone. And when you finally stop showing up, stop giving, stop being that soft landing they secretly relied on, reality hits like a tidal wave. The people they chase now don't understand them like you did. The distractions don't soothe the same way your presence did. The new relationships might be exciting, but they're surface level. They don't go deep. They don't challenge growth. They don't feel safe. They feel noisy. Suddenly, what you brought becomes rare, priceless, irreplaceable. But here's the twist. By the time they realize that, you've changed. You're no longer the person who over-explains, over-invests, or waits for someone to catch up emotionally. You've evolved. You've built your own peace. And now, that peace feels better than any potential reconnection with someone who couldn't value it when it was theirs. As Lao Tzu once said, care about what other people think and you will always be their prisoner. But you've broken free. They thought you were weak for loving them deeply. But the truth, it takes strength to love someone who can't even love themselves. And that's what terrifies them now. You were their chance at real connection. And they fumbled it. Not because you stopped loving, but because they never learned how to accept love in the first place. Now they're spiraling. Now they're watching in silence. Now they're facing a truth that will haunt them quietly for years to come. You were never the problem. You were the proof. Proof that love doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just walks away and never looks back. Or key point 6, your growth becomes a threat to their comfort zone. Here's the devastating truth for your avoidant ex. You were never supposed to outgrow them. They thought you'd stay stuck in the same emotional cycle, chasing, hoping, waiting. They assumed your world would pause while they figured things out. But when you became unavailable and started evolving, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, they were completely unprepared. Because now your elevation threatens their stagnation. You're reading more, healing more, attracting better energy. You're spending time with people who respect you, environments that challenge you, and routines that nurture you. You're no longer living in emotional survival mode. You're thriving. And nothing makes an avoidant ex panic more than seeing the very person they once dismissed becoming someone they can no longer reach, relate to, or control. Why? Because your growth exposes their lack of it. You're living proof of everything they're afraid to become. Someone who faces their wounds instead of avoiding them. Someone who chooses discomfort in the name of evolution. Someone who stopped settling for emotional breadcrumbs and built a full-course feast alone. And now they're stuck in the same habits. Still running from depth. Still hiding behind detachment. Still calling it peace when it's actually avoidance. Meanwhile, you're glowing from the inside out. You're not just unavailable, you're untouchable. And they feel it every time they check your profile, every time your name crosses their mind, every time they sense that you're not only moving on, you're moving up. That's not just loss. That's a full-blown identity crisis for them. Because if the one person who once made them feel safe and superior is now growing beyond them, they're forced to confront a terrifying possibility. Maybe they're not the high-value one they thought they were. Maybe you were, all along. Your wins are no longer just personal. They're existential threats to the story your ex told themselves to feel better about pushing you away. So, don't shrink. Don't explain. Don't make it make sense for someone who feared your depth and rejected your light. Your growth is the closure. Your transformation is the revenge. Your evolution is the echo in their silence. And it will keep getting louder every time you rise. Key point 7. The moment you let go is the moment they begin to grieve you. In silence. Here's what they'll never tell you out loud, but feel in every quiet moment. Your absence hurts more than your presence ever did. Avoidant exes don't grieve the relationship when it ends. They grieve it after. When the dust settles, the attention fades, and the high of freedom turns into numbness. At first, they celebrate your silence. It feels like control. They tell themselves they're fine, maybe even relieved. But weeks pass. The silence continues. And eventually, reality creeps in. Because now the energy they once depended on to feel desired is gone. No more texts, no more second chances, no more emotional safety net. Just the echo of their own choices. And that's when it hits. They didn't just lose a relationship, they lost you, your laughter, your presence, your emotional availability, your patience, your belief in their potential, all gone and replaced with nothing. Avoidants often believe the grass will be greener when they leave. But what they don't expect is that you were the grass, you were the garden, you were the light. And now they're left in a desert of their own making, dehydrated for the very connection they once rejected. As Viktor Frankl wrote, "What is to give light must endure burning." And you did. You burned silently. You endured, hoping they'd turn toward the flame. But they turned away. And now they can't find the warmth anywhere else. This isn't the kind of grief that gets closure. There's no goodbye text, no breakdown call, no "I messed up" confession. It's the quiet kind, the one that lingers, that eats away in the early morning hours, that stings when they see someone who reminds them of you, that cuts deep when they realize they'll never be loved like that again. Because what you gave wasn't just affection, it was depth. And people don't forget depth, they bury it. But it resurfaces, always. Usually right when they realize the version of you they ignored is the version they now miss most. And now, you're not mad, you're not waiting, you're done. And that, my friend, is grief they'll carry quietly for years to come. So here's the bottom line. When you become unavailable, you don't just disappear, you become unforgettable. Your absence is a lesson, your silence is a mirror, and your emotional detachment? It's the plot twist they never saw coming. They thought they'd walk away, and you'd crumble. They thought they could reject you, replace you, forget you. But instead, you rose. And now the person who once acted like they didn't care is sitting in silence, watching, obsessing, regretting, while you thrive without ever looking back. Don't go chasing ghosts. Don't water a garden that scorched your roots. And never beg someone to see your value when your absence already proved it. Because the most savage glow-up isn't proving them wrong. It's living so far above their old patterns. They can't even reach your level to apologize. They lost access not because you changed, but because you finally saw the truth. If you felt that, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this journey isn't over. Comment your mantra below. I gave peace. They gave panic. Let's flood the comments with power, not pity. Share this video with someone who's struggling to let go. And if you want to help us keep creating these truth bomb videos, consider joining our channel membership, because healing deserves a voice that never flinches. Next up, they rejected you, but your avoidant ex is still obsessed. You think they moved on? You think that no was the end of the story? What if I told you rejection was never closure, just a mask they wore to hide their obsession? In the next video, we're peeling back the layers and exposing the 7 disturbing signs your avoidant ex is secretly watching, wondering, and wishing they never let you go. They said they didn't want you, but they can't stop thinking about you. Don't miss it. Hit subscribe, turn on the bell, because this isn't just closure, it's a comeback. See you in the next one.